welcome everybody. My name is Rocky Ross, and I am the host and curator of the Reboot Storytelling Reimagined. Welcome, Rebooters. Welcome, everybody who hasn't been here before. We appreciate you being here. We know you have lots of other options. As storytellers and performers, we miss you, and we are holding a place in our hearts for you in the stages we hope to be reopening soon. We can't see you, but we can feel you out there. So put your name in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I know that we have people from all over the country tonight, and we just want to be able to be interactive in that chat. In the before times, the Reboot Storytelling Reimagined was outdoors under the stars in a beautiful little venue in a small little town called Morro Bay in a coffee house. And we had standing room only audience for 3 years. And we told stories, moth type stories, but the Reboot Storytelling Reimagined, emphasis on the reimagined, we like to try new things. So we do our storytelling, and we also use anything in service to the theme. So sometimes we throw improv and sketch and spoken word, and we love to do audience participation as well. So tonight's show also features a mix of things, so not straight ahead storytelling. I started conceptualizing this show back in December. I was kind of blue, as a lot of us were, and I needed a project. I needed something to hang on to get me up out of bed and excited. I was working from home, but I just needed that project. And the Reboot presents COVID Stories, Please Scream Inside Your Heart edition would not have come about were it not for the encouragement of my creative collaborator and friend and tonight's co-host, who's a stand-up comedian, storyteller, and youth advocate, Kader Abdi. And he is joining us from the DMV area. Now, I used to think that was the Department of Motor Vehicles, but Kader tells me it is the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Did I get that right?
Correct. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Kader is going to be our chat master tonight. So he'll be interacting with you. We have some ideas for you to put stuff in the chat in a little bit. And I'm just so happy to have you with me here, Kader. Kader and I are just one of the small slivers of good blooming in the pandemic shadow. At the start of lockdown, I was filled with dread, and time was just ticking by so slowly. I do improv, and I just loved that juice. I wanted more improv, so I went online and started searching, how can I connect with more people?
I too, when the pandemic started, I felt anxious and uncertain, and I was doing a lot of improv, and then we switched to virtual improv with Reflex Improv here in the DMV. And one day, as I was doing improv, Rocky logged in, and we have been doing improv together for a while. And then Rocky invited me to tell a story in one of the Reboot shows on online or virtual, and we clicked, and we have been collaborating for a year now.
Yes, and we are an unlikely pair.
Born in Somalia,
Born in San Francisco,
Black,
white,
East Coast,
West Coast,
millennial,
baby boomer.
but we have so much in common, and we both do what we love, bringing you the Reboot presents COVID stories. Please scream inside your heart. Rocky, please tell us about the theme.
Yeah. So this is an interesting story in and of itself. In June 2020, the Japanese theme park called Fuji Q Highland reopened in Tokyo with new COVID rules banning screaming on their famously terrifying roller coaster. The Twitter sphere just lit up. How can you not scream on a roller coaster? And they put out a video of the park's top executives riding the roller coaster, faces super stoic behind masks, not letting out one peep. And that video went viral. I checked it out. And the sign in the video at the end translating the Japanese language of the new theme was, in English, please scream inside your heart. And to me, it was just poetry. It captured for me everything that we have to do in this pandemic. How do we tamp ourselves down on this roller coaster that is COVID? How do we live life out loud when we have to restrain? So thank you for being here. This show, you might be thinking, why would I come to a show about COVID? I hear too much COVID, COVID everywhere. But this show is not about the virus. It's about us and how we connect and adapt and survive. So I usually tell my story at the end of a reboot lineup, but tonight I'm trying something new. I'm a visual storyteller. And we launch with this short piece that I created, which will, just like the show, take us back in time and bring us full circle. Yeah, every time I watch that, it's So, yeah, we are riding the COVID roller coaster, and it's all about reaching through these boxes and bubbles and windows and doors and masks and plastic and vinyl. And we innovate, we humans, we find quirky new ways to connect and hold on to each other. And that's what's important. So tonight, the storytellers put COVID in its place with heart, humor, and grace. And one of the other upsides of being online and being in Zoom is I discovered these amazing storytelling shows around the country, and I've been able to recruit some fabulous storytellers who are with us from all over the country tonight to help tell the COVID story. I promise if you stick with us to the end of this ride, we'll land together on a better side. Because stories are the oxygen of society, and stories are exactly what we need right now. So let's get started. Our first storyteller is Sheila Arnold. She is renowned, much in demand. There she is. Uh, Sheila Arnold is a teaching artist and founder and artistic director of Artists Standing Strong Together, which helps connect independent artists with resources. Miss Sheila has been a full-time storyteller since 2003, performing at schools and festivals around the country. I first heard Miss Sheila tell this very story in December in another storytelling show put on by 6 Feet Apart Productions, which is fabulous. And I just wanted more people to hear her and hear this story. I'm delighted, Sheila, that you are able to be with us tonight, coming all the way from Hampton, Virginia, to recount this unique pandemic story. Take it away, Miss Sheila.
I decided I would start at 2:29 p.m. I chose that time because I was going to honor people that had died and we couldn't gather together. That was back in March, and 2:29 was the date of the first person that we knew that had died from COVID. So 2:29 p.m. every day, I was going to go online and open up a Zoom room and we could begin to grieve those that we couldn't gather to grieve. I was excited about this, and no one really came. But the first time someone did come, because there was a storyteller that had died and some friends came in, it was April 1st. And on that day, I had some friends that came in and we began, and then all of a sudden, everything on the screen changed. In came a picture and a picture and another picture, and they were saying awful things and they had terrible backgrounds, and I didn't know what was happening. Had I known, I would have understood. I was being Zoom bombed. But I was Zoom bombed before there was even the word Zoom bombed. I didn't know what that was. And so I'm just watching all this and I'm like, oh, this is awful. So I tried to charge along, and the friends that came in were rather disturbed, and so was I by what I saw and what we heard. And eventually I was able to get most of the people out of there. Well, I immediately studied up on what I needed to do, and I got myself together in Zoom. I had everything where it was supposed to be, so I could click a person out just like that. I was ready. And so I came in the next day. And the next day I got on, and it happened again. Again, they came in, these awful backgrounds behind them. Again, I saw this happening. But this time I was a little more interested, and I was curious about what they were there for. And so I would say, well, what's your name? And boy, they gave me some great names. One guy, his name was Nick Gurr. Yeah, I didn't catch on real quick. And so I asked another kid what his name was, and he said his name was Mo, and his last name was Lester. Mo Lester. Yeah. I still didn't catch on. And I had the nerve to ask another kid what their name was. And they said, oh, my sister, my sister's boyfriend is really sick in COVID. I'm like, oh, what's his name? Mike. Oh, okay. What's his, Mike what? Rochburns. Mike Crotchburns. Yeah. I didn't get it. I was way too old for this. And I eventually got them all out and it was done. I did not want to come back on the next day. I really, really didn't. But I went back on. Something pushed me to do that. And they came back. But I was determined to do what I wanted to do, which was honor those that had gone before us. And so this time I started knocking kids out, and they were all young men at this point. And I started just removing them from a room and removing them from a room. And then I got to one name, and his name was Jack. And he said, "Miss Sheila, please don't remove me." Well, this surprised me. Actually, I didn't say it because I didn't let them all talk, but he had chatted it to me. And I said, "Well, you're going to do wrong things and I can't have you." "I promise I won't." I said, "Then remove that awful background you had." And he did. And he asked if he could unmute. I said, "Yes, if you listen." So he unmuted. I let him unmute and he listened. And the rest of the kids that came in, they listened too. And then as I got ready to get off, the kid said, Jack said, "Will you be back tomorrow? Same link?" "Yeah." "Okay, see you tomorrow." What? Well, they came back the next day, and I realized that they were all a group of kids that knew each other. They were teenagers, high schoolers that all knew each other. And this time they brought two friends, and one of them was a girl, and they all told me their names. And so I got ready to do what I was doing, which was saying a poem and singing a song and speaking the names of those who had died. And they listened. They took a moment of silence with me. On this particular one, I had told some friends what had happened, and these kids seemed to want to come, and she came in to listen as well. And she noted the kids seemed to like really be listening. And on this particular time, I told them a story. I told them the story about my sister Vicky, who when she was 14 years old, she had died from unexpected circumstances. And I told them that and told them that it was difficult for me to deal with, but that I learned how to live again, and told them I was sharing it because I didn't know if they might have death around them from the pandemic and such. They listened. They liked the story. They asked if they could come back. And so it began. Every day at 2:29 p.m., I went online to honor the dead, and I was met with the Zoom bombers who had suddenly become just teenagers. And they came in and listened. Sometimes I would ask them to do the poem or for them to say the names or to give me a name. And I was always surprised one day when one young man came in and said, "I have a name today. Can I share it?" It's like, "Yeah, sure." And I was surprised by the fact that they would come in every day. One of the days, Jack was in the car with his mother, driving out to the baseball field of all places. And he gets on his phone. He says, "Hey, Mom, here's that woman that I'm on the phone with every day." I had no idea what his mom might have been thinking, that some grown woman was online with a bunch of teenagers, but she just smiled pleasantly. And every day I met with these kids. And I was really there still to honor the dead. But then we spent time talking. They shared with me what it was like to not be in classes, to have your sister come home from college early, for the household to be different, for someone in the house to have been near someone that had COVID and the fear that was there. They talked about what they were missing. Starbucks was a big thing on the list there. But they missed doing things. They missed even their teachers. And we talked and I listened. And then we had been doing this for 2 or 3 weeks. And one day we got on and there were a bunch of boxes that flew into the room and bunch of kids, and there were horrible backgrounds again. And Jack said to me, "Miss Sheila, let me at them. Let me at them. I want to get there. How dare they come into our group?" And I laughed and said, "That is exactly what you did." "No, we didn't. We didn't do that. We didn't do that." "Yes, you did." "No, we didn't." "Yes, you did." He quieted down, and that was the day they all told me their real names. It wasn't Jack. It was Seth. And all the kids gave me their real names, and suddenly we really were friends. It would be for another 3 weeks, and then I realized it was time for me to stop. And I was grateful that we had a time together, a celebration. And we still are in contact because in the midst of this COVID, in the midst of this COVID, they have an adult, Miss Sheila, who they can come to. And we can have some good times on Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Sheila. I'm glad those kids found you. Thank you. Our next storyteller is J.P. Frary. He comes to us from San Francisco. He's only been telling stories for a few years, but he's already won 3 Moth Story Slams. JP is a maker of things, beautiful things, mostly of wood and metal. I believe in the chat box, you'll see his website, and I highly recommend you go there. He's a wonderful, wonderful maker of beautiful art, furniture as art. JP works in construction, and he grew up in Mendocino County, where his ability to come up with a story got him into trouble as often as it got him out of trouble. In this story, JP gets a bird's eye view of quarantine life at the very start of lockdown.
I don't look essential. I don't feel essential. The government decided I was essential. When the pandemic first started in March, a year ago, my building got shut down. I run an art studio called Alameda Point Studios, and my running that building is a side hustle. I really build furniture, artsy furniture for a living, but I run the building. And when we got shut down, that put 40 artists out of work. And I was the only person that could come in to the building. And I would go in to get the mail and bring packages in and do whatever had to be done. But the phone didn't ring. I had projects in process, but nobody called to ask for deliveries. Everything just shut down. But the first week of April, the government decided that what I did for a living was essential because I made things for the home. I made tables, I made vanities, I'd made kitchen cabinets, and everybody was stuck at home. So the government decided that I was essential. And the second that hit the newspaper, my phone started ringing. The calls were all the same. The calls were very polite people saying, I heard that you can work again. I have an unusual request. I need a desk. I need a work surface. I need a home office. I need you to be able to divide a room into 2 or 3 different rooms. And I jumped at the chance because I didn't know how long this was going to last. And I made a few of these desks. Towards the end of April, the tone of the phone calls really started to change. People weren't polite anymore. The phone call was really like a plea for help. This guy called and he said, I have to Zoom from home, excuse me, with my 9th grader and my 6th grader at the same table. The 9th grader is taking algebra and asked for help, but they changed algebra. It's not the same as when I was in 9th grade, and I can't help him. And the 6th grader is doing some project on state capitals. And when she said something about Bismarck being a state capital, I told her, no, Bismarck was in Germany. And the 6th grader just rolled her eyes at me. Can you please come and put a desk in my garage? I'm going to put the kids in the garage. And when I came and did that, the kids looked more relieved than the dad. Shortly after that, a woman called and said she wanted to change her nursery into an office. And she said, and I quote, the baby can sleep anywhere. And I said, oh, so you're going to move into the nursery yourself? And she goes, no, that's for the husband because I cannot hear him tell a stupid joke over Zoom again. Now in May, things started to morph again. I was delivering things to people's houses. And in the beginning, when I would deliver, everybody would disappear. They would get in the car or they would go for a walk and I would be in their house alone. And they would tell me, text us when you're done installing and we'll come back. And I thought that was good. We weren't all in the same place, but it started to change. I would show up to a place and people would be wearing a mask and their kids would be on the couch with their computers and they would put on their masks and then I would go and fix up whatever had to be fixed. But towards the end of May, the beginning of June, it changed again. I would show up to a house and no one would be wearing a mask. They would open the door and ask me to come in and I would be wearing a mask and I would tell them, oh, could you please put a mask on? And they would look at me like I was strange at first and then go, oh yeah, sorry. And they would just pull their shirt up like this and invite me in. Now, when somebody pulls their shirt up like that, you see the belly button ring. And I saw a lot of belly button rings. I saw a belly button ring on a dude who was wearing boxer shorts. And when he lifted his shirt up, I have to tell you, it's not an attractive thing, the belly button ring on a guy in boxer shorts. The next thing in July, as we moved into August, I would show up to a house and people would invite me in and the kids wouldn't put on masks. The parents wouldn't tell the kids to go anywhere. I'd be in a bedroom installing some desk and a 7-year-old would just walk in. Now, a 7-year-old can derail your day like no one else. The 7-year-old would say, what kind of tool is that? And I would say, oh, that's a drill. Well, why do you have 2 of them? Well, I drill a hole with one and I screw a screw in with the other. Oh, my dad has a drill, but my mom won't let him use it because she says he'll drill a hole in his head. I have a fish. Do you have a fish? No, I don't have a fish. Oh, well, I wanted a hamster, but my sister has allergies. So I can't have a hamster. I have to have a fish. Do you have allergies? No, I don't have allergies. Oh, do you have a hamster? No, I don't have a hamster. And I would be waiting for a parent to come in to drag this kid away, but they would never come. And at that point in the pandemic, you realized if somebody was entertaining your 7-year-old, that was the greatest thing in your life. I could have been licking that child's forehead and no one would have come to his rescue. I mean, they didn't know me. They called me out of the blue. Now, the phone was still ringing, but now towards August, it changed. It was single people that called me. And at first I thought, look, you don't need a home office because you're single and you live alone. But the single people would call and want to talk to me about this dining room table they wanted that would seat 10 people. And they said, I'm going to send you a picture of the chairs that I want to go with it. And they would send me some picture they stole off of Houzz or Pinterest. And after talking to them, I would realize they didn't want this table. They really didn't need this table. They couldn't even fit this table in their current place, but they kept calling. They keep calling. The single people, they want to talk about upholstery. They want to talk about the fact that they broke up with somebody right before COVID started. And now they're thinking about getting back together with that person just because maybe that's what they should do. And they talk to me about their mom. And the single people, they talk to me about their succulent garden and their sourdough starter. And one of them told me about his uncle who rowed a boat across the English Channel. And he said, why do they call it the English Channel? Shouldn't it be called the English and French Channel or just the French Channel? And I don't hang up on these people, even though they never order anything and I never do any work for them because I get to go home to a family. I get to go to work. I get to go to a building and make things with my hands. And these single people, they're home and they don't see anybody except for who they talk to on Zoom or on the phone. So I'll keep talking to them. But I am not essential, and I don't want to be essential any longer. Thank you.
Oh, JP, you had me laughing. Thank you. Thank you so much for that bird's eye view. Whew. Okay. Our next little bit is a big bit. Antonio Rocha came to the U.S. from Brazil in 1988 to study mime with Master Tony Montanaro and later with the great Marcel Marceau. And he's lived in the beautiful state of Maine ever since. Antonio is an award-winning storyteller, 2-time TEDx presenter with a summa cum laude degree in theater. He tells personal and traditional stories with his fierce and tender voice at festivals around the world. But tonight, Antonio is excited to perform 3 short silent narratives that he created just for this show. When COVID forced us into isolation, we hunkered down in our separate boxes, masked up and trying to keep that dread at bay. At some level, we're all reeling from much that is not easily named. Using his whole body, Antonio Rocha channels for us COVID's emotional landscape. Thank you. Thank you, Antonio. I think my voice is breaking up. I'm trying very hard just to speak softly. I want to thank Antonio. He has 2 more mime studies later in the show. And Cotter is with us because we have something we want to share with you. Last September, thousands of people around the country responded to author Larry Smith's call in the New York Times to use the 6-word memoir format to make sense of this moment in history. One person, one story, 6 words at a time. I read these in the New York Times and I just love them. They say so much in so few words. I culled a few of these tiny gems from that New York Times piece to share with you tonight. And Cotter has an idea for how you guys can participate.
Yes, so as you see these 6-word memoirs, you might get inspired. And if you feel so, please, we encourage you to share your experience with only 6 words. Please drop them in the comment box and we will keep them and we might end up sharing some of them. So please feel inspired. We encourage you to do so.
So if there's a time that you felt like screaming inside your heart or, again, had an epiphany, we'll show you now an example of them. We'll run that for you right now. Beautiful. I see some people already are putting some ideas in the chat. Thank you. Okay, now we're all in this together. That's a very rousing saying that it's very often true. We've all been heartened by the gestures of love and support we've seen during the pandemic. But sometimes there is no team, and the burden falls heavier on just one person's shoulders. I've stopped assuming that I know what the pandemic is like for other people and that I can understand what others have lost and sacrificed. Our next storyteller, Maria Morris, comes to us from the great city of Chicago. Maria is a writer, actor, Moth Story Slam champ, living in a very full house.
I was never in favor of the death penalty, but then my in-laws moved in with us a little over a year ago. My father-in-law said, "We're out of money. We have no other options." I said, "Wait, how can you be broke? You just took us all to Alaska on a cruise last year." My mother-in-law chimes in, "Well, that's where it went." Andy, my husband, and I had been married for 11 years, and I was finding out right then that his parents aren't financially secure. We visited them so many times in Florida. I have to say, they did a very good impression of people with money. I dreaded the idea of my mother moving in with us because she's the most entitled person I've ever met. I mean, the valet parking guys at the Neiman Marcus in Boca Raton have hung a huge plaque in her honor. I told my father-in-law that my biggest concern was that I couldn't handle any more chores, any more responsibilities around my house. He said, "Don't worry, we're 100% independent. We do everything for ourselves. You won't have to do anything for us." I know I might be giving you the impression that I'm a jerk, an asshole, not a nice person, but it's not true. I'm a pretty good person. I do have trouble setting boundaries. And then I get mad at people for crossing the boundaries that I didn't tell them existed. On top of everything with this in-law situation, my own mom, who's 84, was already living with us. She has dementia, and she needs a lot of care and a lot of attention. And she's like a part-time job for me. And she was making it hard, not she personally, but her situation and my situation with her was making it hard for me to do any work that actually pays money. But then January 2020 comes and the in-laws move in. I start calling them the house plants, not to their face. Every spare inch of wall and floor area is covered with their shit. I'm claustrophobic immediately. And they are independent, like my father-in-law said, unless you consider being able to load a dishwasher part of independence, or taking the garbage out, or unloading the dishwasher, or cooking, or cleaning, or driving. If any of those things are part of independence, not for them. Or being to go up and down stairs. Here's the kicker. After their belongings were already on the truck to move here, my mother-in-law said that neither of them can really do stairs. That meant we had to give up our bedroom on the first floor, a master suite with a bathroom and a walk-in closet. I said to Andy, "This is the deal breaker, right? We have to tell them." Let me rephrase that. You have to tell them they're going to have to move into assisted living, right? With that, Andy summoned his superpower, avoidance. He put on his cape and he said, "Let me think about it." And then COVID struck. 2 of my adult children move in with us. There's so many people in our house, every meal feels like I'm cooking a holiday dinner. My mother-in-law at some point goes, "This kitchen is a complete dump." She rearranged all the drawers. I could not find a fucking potato peeler to save my life. By early April, I'm thinking, I'm not going to survive if this really drags out until late May. What am I going to do if really this goes to the end of next month? My inability to work was really triggering because other than spiders, my biggest fear in life is getting old and having no money and no roof over my head. I wanted to work. I needed to be able to support myself or support Andy and me. Before COVID, I used to go to the public library. That was the way I got respite time from being with my mom. It was only like 4 hours a week, but it was valuable to me. And now I have nowhere to go. I drive to the beach, which is closed, and I sit there in my parked car and I stare at the water. One day I'm sitting there and I look around and I realize there's another half a dozen people doing the exact same thing as me. I nod to the guy next to me. I'm like, yeah, I hear you. Trouble at home? Tell me about it. It all came to a head one day in late May or early June. I got home from Costco with this big, beautiful bundle of Kirkland brand toilet paper. It was the first time I've been able to buy toilet paper since March. I was really proud of myself. My mother-in-law looked at me disapprovingly. My father-in-law says to me, I really need to use Charmin toilet paper for technical reasons. I opened my mouth and out came, you have to move out now. Right now. Go pack. I stopped cooking, cleaning, driving, laundry. I stayed in my room. I wouldn't speak to anybody but my mother and my kids. While I was up there in my hiding place, I did research on Medicaid. I found out they don't qualify for assisted living. They don't qualify for a skilled nursing home. They have nowhere to go. It took days for me to come to terms with that. And with no way out, I chose a path of radical acceptance. I let go of the illusion of control and I allow myself to think that things are right now are as they're going to be. I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to judge myself and how I'm reacting to it. It is. Let me tell you, it takes practice. I think Freud called this his it is what it is paradox. Then in October, my mother-in-law fainted right in front of me. She was stumbling and then she landed. I got her to the hospital and they admitted her because they couldn't get her heart rate under control and her blood pressure was all over the place. The next morning, the hospital called. She had COVID. She hadn't been out of the house since March. This was October of 2020. I'm the only person really that goes to the grocery store and runs errands. I think it was me that brought the infection home. I felt horrible. I'm talking to her on the phone while she's in her hospital bed and I could hear her wheezing. I knew she was afraid. We were all afraid. We weren't talking about it because why would you do that? For a week, she wasn't getting worse. She wasn't getting better. I talked to the doctor every day. There was really a lot of concern about her heart muscle. But at the 2-week point, she turned a corner. She started to feel better. And eventually, she was able to come home. After she dodged that COVID bullet that may have been caused by me, that I really am sure was caused by me, I realized that I may feel like I want to kill these people at sometimes, but I really don't want them dead. Not at all. Thank you.
I loved it. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Very, very honest. Thank you. Okay. No COVID Stories show would be complete without a special place for the first responders, the doctors and nurses who carry us through. I was searching high and low through the internet everywhere when I heard about the 3rd annual University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine Nurses Story Slam. Who knew nurses have a story slam? It was happening that day. The day I read about it was happening at 5 o'clock that day. I signed up and I listened to 8 amazing nurses tell stories. And when I heard our next storyteller, I knew you had to hear her too. Hope Atkins Durante is a nurse who's working in the ICU at Lancaster General Hospital in Pennsylvania. This is only her 2nd time doing public storytelling. I'm so grateful to have you with us tonight, Hope. Please tell us your story.
Number 3, I want you to remember that number as I tell you my story. In April of 2020, I was transferred to the COVID unit. COVID-19 was all over the news, as was the sentiment that heroes working on the front lines, us, the nurses, and other people were heroes. That word heroes weighed so heavy on my heart and my shoulders. And I wanted to rise to that ideal, but I was so scared. I walked onto the COVID unit, and I walked through the ante room onto the floor, and I saw myself surrounded by a bunch of nurses covered in seal blue nursing scrubs. I was greeted kindly and escorted off and shown where to get my own scrubs and where to get my own PPE. And soon I rejoined that sea as a piece of it rather than just an onlooker. Number 3, I got my patient assignment and I realized very quickly one-to-one patient care on a COVID unit takes a lot of time. I would spend an hour or more in my patient's room before I would come out into the hallway again. And the one time I came out into the hallway and I saw a small group of these seal blue nurses talking, and I knew immediately what they were talking about. Someone was dying on the other side of that hallway of COVID-19. So began the dance. The dance, I think nurses know that maybe other people don't know. When that last song for a patient is played, which is silent, we move intentionally and we move methodically, and we each take a turn giving, either giving the family a tissue or we take in some cold water. We all rotate in and out, joining essentially a dance, making sure that patient's last song and last dance is met by the fullest extent of our abilities. And so I listened, I paid attention to what was happening in that room, and I never lost sight of it because I was waiting for my turn to join that dance. Number 3. When I came out again, I heard the primary nurse say she was getting an admission, and I remember hearing her say she did not want this patient to die alone. So I took that as my opportunity. I put on my PPE and I slipped behind the door, and I remember closing the door and I remember looking at it, and I turned to see the patient in the bed who was struggling to breathe. And I could tell he was struggling because the sheet rose as his stomach pushed out air with his lungs in a way that wasn't natural. So I grabbed a chair and I sat down beside him. I looked at his name band. I wanted to know his first name so I could speak to him, calling him by his first name. And I held his hand. And I said the Lord's Prayer. I made small talk with him. I have a lot of pets. So I asked him if he had pets. And I knew he couldn't respond to me, but I know hearing is the last sense to go when you're dying. So I spoke to him like I would speak to anyone that I loved. And I sat for a long time. I brushed his hair across his forehead. I didn't know what to say. And I finally said to him, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't fix this. I'm sorry that you have to meet God in this sterile room, but I'm right here beside you. And if you see that light, you go towards it. So I took my turn. I came out, but it changed me. That whole experience changed me. Every single day that week, I looked for this patient's obituary. 7 days passed and I saw nothing. When I'd seen the primary nurse again, just in passing in the hallway, I said, I was looking for this patient's obituary, and I didn't see it, and I wanted to know why. And she told me that he was a ward of the state and that he was from a nursing home. So he wouldn't have an obituary. He wouldn't have a funeral. He wouldn't have any of the things we would want for someone in our family or someone we care about. Number 3. So it was heartbreaking, and I wrote about that. I posted it on social media, and a professor that I had in nursing school saw it and it inspired her. And together we wrote an article. We were published in the December issue of Nursing 2020. And soon after, my CNO heard about this article and she was reading it at an open board meeting. She was reading what I had written about this patient at an open board meeting. A couple days later, I get a phone call from a local news station asking if they could meet me. They wanted to know more about what I'd written about this man. And in that moment, I realized I was meant to enter his room. I was meant to sit at his bedside because he was meant to be remembered, as are every one of the greater than 500,000 people that this disease and this virus has taken from us. His story was meant to live on, and me telling his story to you is just another layer in his story. In April of 2020, a man died of COVID-19. He died in room number 3, and his name was Keith.
And your name is Hope.
Yes.
And hope is how we go on, and why, amidst all of this, we can still mine for life's small treasures. Thank you, Antonio. We have one more mime study later in the show. Thank you, Antonio. And more 6-word pandemic memoirs about some of the positive, good things that we can find. There really is more kindness than hate. We got to believe that. We got to be that. So now we're going to change it up, and we bring you a pair of stories about the brave new world of online learning from a student and a teacher's perspective. But first, I have to give you a little bit of backstory because this is one more connection that never would have happened were it not for COVID. So I was quarantining with way too much time on my hands, and I needed something constructive to do. I pulled out my bucket list and see, from living in Rio de Janeiro for 3 years back in the 1980s, I'm fluent in Portuguese. But if you don't use it, you lose it. And my language chops were getting rusty. So I decided to look for a practice partner on the website. It's called Conversation Exchange. And being a science nerd myself, I was drawn to the profile of a visiting chemistry professor from Sao Paulo who was on a teaching fellowship at UC San Diego. He wanted to practice his English. So I reached out to Fabio Forti. We met up on Zoom and we clicked. And soon his lovely wife, Juliana, and his beautiful daughters, Sophia and Bianca, were joining the conversation. And that blossomed into regular Friday happy hours on Zoom. Here we are celebrating New Year's Eve together. That was a wonderful time. We learned a lot of new vocabulary and we laughed a lot, and it really took away that sting of loneliness to have that Friday night date. Now, Sophia Forti is 15 years old. She's a sophomore at La Jolla High School in San Diego, and she is going to tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a teenager. Hey, going to school in her bedroom, in a foreign country, in a foreign language, but her English is quite good. And then right after Sophia, we'll get the teacher's point of view from my dear friend and fellow improviser with Central Coast Comedy Theater, Shauna Volpe. Shauna is also a stand-up comedian who teaches drama at Atascadero High School here on the Central Coast. Oh, and did I mention Shauna is still recovering from COVID and teaching at the same time. So first you're going to hear from Sophia Forti and then Shauna Volpe. It's your turn, Sophia. Go for it.
So we arrived in San Diego in February 2020. I was excited about spending a year in the US with my family, improving my English and checking out all the American stuff. I wanted to experience California. I'd only been in class at La Jolla High School for about 4 weeks, not enough time to really make new friends. When COVID shut everything down, including my plans. Now, I sit in front of my computer 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. PE is a disaster. Doing push-ups in my pajamas? No way. On Fun Fridays, my PE teacher lets us choose between jogging, walking, or riding a bike, and I have to enter my GPS coordinates into an app so it has proof that I'm actually doing it. Doing physics and math online is crushing, but on the other hand, I do like world history. My history teacher, Mr. Stephens, is a really nice guy. I can tell he really likes teaching and he misses us students. You see, my school district has a policy that students can't be forced to keep their cameras on, so most of them don't turn them on at all. One day, about halfway through the first quarter, Mr. Stephens said, "Come on, guys, teaching to black screens is killing me. Please turn your cameras on." So, most of the class turned their cameras on because he asked, but the next day, only half had their cameras on, and the day after that, even fewer. I felt sorry for him, and I kept my camera on, and now I'm pretty much the only student he sees every day, so it's kind of lonely. I also like my English teacher. She made us read the book Night by Elie Wiesel, who survived the Holocaust. We had good discussions about empathy and resilience. Then, she asked each of us to write a poem about living through the pandemic, inspired by Wiesel's poem, Never Shall I Forget. My poem is called Remind Me to Forget, and here it is. Remind me to forget the fear of an unknown virus. Remind me to forget my tears. Remind me to forget people are dying and there's nothing I can do. Remind me to forget the fear of losing who I love. Remind me to forget the daily lack of motivation. Remind me to forget the disappointment, to forget the fear, to forget the hate, to forget how blind people are. But don't forget to remind me that I can make them see. Don't forget to remind me that I am the change. Don't forget to remind me that I can help. Don't forget to remind me of hope, to remind me of love, to remind me how lucky I am. Thank you.
Okay, Sophia, first of all, you're so right. It is brutal looking at icons. It's really hard to interact with a picture of a little corgi and a Pokemon and a duck, and it's like, this is exactly what it's like. It's like this. Hi, can you turn on your camera? Will you turn on your camera? Oh, I can't hear you. Turn on your microphone. Will you turn on your microphone? Oh, it was working. It was working just a minute ago. Can you turn it back on? Okay, can you hear me? Oh, you're frozen. You're frozen. I can't hear you. Oh, I'm frozen? Okay, I'm gonna leave and come back. Can you hear me? Oh, can you turn on your camera? But will you turn on your camera? Okay, these are the daily online teaching conversations that I am having, and it's exhausting. And where you have my students that will come to me and their computer mysteriously dies right before they have a presentation to do. Or I have, oh, Miss Volpa, it's due today. It's bad internet. I can't, bad internet. Okay, and what sucks is that you don't know if it's real or it's an excuse, because technical problems happen. And there's always something going on, it seems like, with the internet or the connection or whatever. It's like they have upped their excuse. So it's no longer like my dog ate my homework. It could be legit this time. So you never know. I don't know. I just this morning received another picture that my students have started in one of my classes of when I freeze and I'm teaching. And so they've started a collage of my face, like double chinned with like one eye closed and my mouth open in some sort of monster shot that they put all together. And I can't even be mad at it. If this is what gets them to come to class and like create a community around my frozen face of monstrosity, then that's great. That means they're focused and they're paying attention. Wait for Volpa to freeze. I don't even care. I was just told by a student yesterday that there's an Instagram now of videos of me teaching in class, and they're all talking about it. And I was like, what? Are they hating on me? And he's like, no. They just said you're annoying and weird. I guess they're not really wrong. I mean, I guess it would be annoying if you had to come to class at 7:45 in the morning and your theater teacher's like, yay, let's shake it out. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, everybody. I mean, I'm trying to get them engaged and have fun in online theater. So yeah, I could see how that might be annoying. And all of this happening and teaching, on the other side of the wall is my son, who's in 5th grade, in our living room / dining room, and he is in his online school, which is sometimes a hot mess. And in between classes, I will go out and try and regulate. I have gone out to him being completely surrounded by every chair that he could find, upside down, drinking orange juice while in class. And I'm like, what are you doing? Sit up, pay attention. And he's like, it's okay, my camera's off. Okay, so the struggle is real. And then I got COVID. And talk about miserable. It is pretty stinking miserable. Not everybody, but it's not a fun journey. It's the fever and the body aches and the chills and the fatigue and the cough and all of the things that come with it. And then my son got it. And we thought that my husband was like Iron Man because he was taking care of us. I was like, how is he not affected? And then 5 days into us having COVID, it hit him, and it hit him really, really hard. And so he actually got it worse than I did. And he lost a bunch of weight and was really sick. And I had friends ask me like, oh, did you lose weight? Because you can't like smell and taste, which I could not. And then I'm like, no, because I didn't need to taste the pizza to eat the pizza. I didn't need to smell the donut to eat the donut. So no, did I lose any weight during COVID? No, I did not. I ate it anyways. Okay. Yeah. And through all of this, I'm teaching. Through all of this, I'm teaching, and I'm hoping that my recovery continues. Definitely hope I'm not a long hauler and hold on to all of the headaches and all of these things that came anew with this COVID. But I want to be with the students, and I can't wait to be back in person because I hate looking at the icons. I want to see my students' faces. I miss their faces. So give us a break and turn on your camera. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Shauna and Sophia. Boy, do I look red. I thank all the teachers and students. We feel you. So our next storyteller is Jean Melter, and or am I out of order here?
So you are not out of order. I just jumped in because I'm so touched by the creativity of the audience. The YouTube comments are amazing. People are sharing their own six-word pandemic memoirs. And I thought I should just come in here, thank everybody who shared, and encourage the rest of you to share your six-word memoirs. It's amazing to see.
I'm so glad you did that, Cotter, because I can't see them in this StreamYard studio. And I thank the audience for doing that because we will save them and put them on the Reboot Facebook page. I appreciate that. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Thank you, Cotter. Okay, our next storyteller is an audience favorite at the Reboot. Jean Melter is a writer and performer with her own one-woman show and an audiobook called Holy Crap, Memoir of a Catholic Girl. I've listened to it. It's fabulous. You can get it wherever you get your audiobooks. Now, distractions have saved our sanity during COVID. Some of us are baking and painting and planting. Even binge-worthy TV helps when used in moderation. Tonight, Jean Melter tells us what happened when she got hooked on a thrilling new genre.
Yeah, well, before the pandemic, my husband and I didn't watch much TV. But after a few weeks, we needed a distraction from reality. So we tried all sorts of shows, comedies, dramedies, trashy, docu-series. But what really makes us forget the real world are thrillers. I'm talking about murders and kidnappings and bombings and bank heists and espionage and blackmail. The main character might be an alcoholic detective or a troubled spy or a wrongly accused suspect or a sad sniper. And they're up against the worst of the worst, like serial killers and terrorists, drug lords, human traffickers. you know, there aren't nearly enough, believe it or not, American thrillers. So we have been around the world, from Belgium to Colombia, from Israel to Australia, all the Scandinavian countries, which are apparently chock full of psychopaths. Who knew? And the characters, no matter from what country, they face terrible dilemmas. Not just their lives are at stake, but their families. The fate of the entire world often rests in the hands of just one person on a very strict deadline. And there are car chases and explosions, fistfights, derailed trains. Even the non-violent scenes are traumatic, filled with threats and ultimatums. Well, I want to tell you, I have learned so much from these shows. Like, you can't trust anyone. And you never know who someone really is. Plus, a lot of practical stuff, like keep your passport handy, or, you know, all of your passports if you have more than one identity. Pay extra for good cell coverage in case you need to call for backup when you're in the middle of a forest or a desert or an abandoned warehouse. Oh, but don't ever agree to meet at an abandoned warehouse. If someone tells you to bring the money or the hostage or whatever to an abandoned warehouse, say no. Just suggest a public place like Dunkin' Donuts or the zoo. Oh, and I've also learned that amnesia is super common. Did you know that? But don't worry if you get it, because all your memories will come back, and then you'll understand who you really are and why you're in this big mess. Oh, and you know what else is common? People in trunks. That's right. At least half the cars you see on the road have a nosy journalist or a double agent like tied up in the trunk. Now, usually they're unconscious, but sometimes they're awake and frantically trying to kick out a taillight. So watch for that the next time you're stuck in traffic, okay? Another thing, if you are a criminal or a snitch or a whistleblower and you're offered witness protection, don't do it, because someone very clever is determined to find you. Might as well face the music now before you go to the trouble of dyeing your hair and moving to someplace boring. Watching thrillers has also made me more perceptive. Now when I go out, following all CDC guidelines, I see things differently. Like, I'll pass one of those iffy small businesses, your soy candles, your shop that only sells olives, the cafe that only serves weird, gross tea. You know, where you go, how the heck does that business stay in business? And I think, yeah, that's where the local mob launders its money. I live near the bay. I'll be kayaking. Oh, look, there's a long-billed curlew, or maybe a marbled godwit. Oh, but what's that bobbing around in the distance? Could be a bloated corpse. Better go check it out. Watching thrillers has also made me think about how I do in an interrogation situation. Like, I'm duct taped to a chair in an abandoned warehouse. The bad guy is there, you know, with all his henchmen. One of them is kind of warming up, like, and there might be a translator present, you know, if I've been captured in a foreign country. And they want to know what I know about the stolen diamonds or nuclear codes or whatever. And I shouldn't say a word. But I'm way too fragile. really on every level to withstand this kind of pressure. I mean, the bad guys wouldn't even have to touch me. They could just withhold snacks for a couple of hours and I'd probably tell them everything. I really should work on that. Thank you.
I didn't know your weak spot is snacks. Thank you, Jean. Okay. We have 2 more storytellers, and then that will be our show. I would love to introduce to you now Michael Kaplan. He's a local playwright here on the Central Coast with several produced plays under his belt. Hello, Michael. He is also an audience favorite at the Reboot, just like Jean. Both of them have helped keep the Reboot alive on Zoom. And Michael prides himself on his excellent timing, but he managed to end his marriage a month before a worldwide pandemic. And tonight, Michael is here to share adventures in online dating during a plague.
There's 2 things that you need to know about online dating during a pandemic. The first is that everything happens backwards. In normal pre-pandemic life, you see somebody at a party or at a club, you know right away that you're attracted to them. And you have that first 5 minutes where you're talking and you can tell that there's chemistry. And in the days and weeks that follow, you can learn all about their character. COVID flips the script. The last thing that you're going to learn about is chemistry because you're terrified of being around a stranger. So this is the trajectory of an online relationship during a plague. It starts here. No, it starts here. You go onto an online dating site, you check out a profile, and you see a photograph that is like a frozen moment of wonderfulness. And immediately the romantic comedy starts unspooling in your mind. It's a rom-com for the ages. And so you swipe left to say that you're interested, and lo and behold, you find out that they swipe left as well. And you are in your sterile COVID bubble, and you are anxious, you're paranoid, you're lying awake at 2 a.m. wondering if the tickle in your throat means that you're going to die, and still someone is interested in you, and that is a big jolt. And so what happens is that you go up to this point here, and that is the first Zoom date. Zoom dates are never that great. And the reason is it's a 2-dimensional representation of somebody from the sternum up, usually with weird lighting. You might as well be flirting with the great and powerful Oz. But if you can get past that point, you get to frenetic and fun texting. And text messaging has this seductive call and response aspect. And look, disembodied infatuation is absolutely contagious. It's as contagious as COVID. And so, you are going back and forth, and you're kicking it up a notch, and you're kicking it up a notch, and then you have a decision that you have to make, which is, are you going to use the kissy face emoji? Because once you do that, there's no coming back. You have absolutely crossed a bridge, and you are saying, I don't really know you, but I am very interested romantically in who you are playing in the movie in my head. And so that's going to take you all the way up to here. And so now what happens here? Well, in the spur of the moment, they send you a little video or a photograph, and it's not a frozen moment of wonderfulness. It's a slice of life. And suddenly you have to recast the movie in your head. And you have to wonder, who have I been dealing with this entire time? And doubt starts to creep in. And this is the second thing that you need to know about online dating in a pandemic, which is distance is meaningless. When you start out 12 miles, 120 miles away, it's all the same taste. You're not going to meet them anytime soon. But now you're suddenly starting to have grave doubts. Maybe you've made this massive error in judgment. Well, my generation does not ghost. We do not disappear overnight without explanation. We have manners. And this is a pandemic. All of us are vulnerable. We have such thin skin. Our skin is repelling the virus daily. We need to be kind to each other. So you get in the car and you drive the 160 miles to Malibu. You drive the 185 miles to San Jose. And now you're finally going to have those first 5 minutes at the party. But you can't just have the 5 minutes. You can't look over their shoulder as you're talking and see who else is in the room. You are on the hook for the 2-hour socially distant coffee, the 3-hour walk, and then the 2-hour glass of wine. And you play it all out. It's a little underwhelming. You sort of knew it would be. You get back in the car. You drive the 185 miles home. The next day, you send each other emails. Okay, the chemistry wasn't really there. It was nice to meet you. Good luck. I hope you find what you're looking for. And they don't get hurt. You don't get hurt. Nobody gets hurt. Except my car. My car is taking a fucking beating during online pandemic dating. So you go back to the dating website and into the settings, and new rule, you're going to have a 30-mile radius. Don't show me anybody further away than that. But there's somebody out there with a loosey-goosey radius, and they swipe left with you, and you get that notification, and of course you're curious, and so you take a look, and it is another frozen moment of wonderfulness, and the rom-com is unspooling in your head, and you are texting, and you are zooming, and you are crossing the kissy face emoji Rubicon, and you're driving the 160 miles to Morgan Hill, walking up to the front door in white knuckle suspense, ready for your first 5 minutes, hoping you can have a beginning that won't be an end. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Speaking of hope of beginnings that would never end, I could relate to your story. So one day I wake up from sleep with my parents staring at me angrily. See, in my culture, you're not allowed to leave the house until you get married. If you want to leave the house, find a wife. Simple rules. Now it's a pandemic. And my parents were just looking at me. And I woke up and I asked them, how can I help you? They looked straight at me and they said, how can you sleep comfortably knowing that you are single? You are 32 years old. What is your excuse? And I was like, it's a pandemic. They looked at me and they were like, excuses, excuses, excuses. You have until the end of the lockdown. You either find yourself a wife or we will. And they walked off. It's safe to say that they want me outside of the house. And I know what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, what are you going to do? Thank you for your concern. There are vaccine rolling out. The country is reopening. The flowers are blooming. And spring is coming. I will be just fine. And now, for our next and last Antonio Rocha's mime study and the last 6-word pandemic memoir on gratitude during the pandemic. What are you grateful for?
Thank you, Antonio, for that beautiful mime study. Yeah, and thank you, volunteers who take experimental vaccines to help us. Our last storyteller is Nestor Gomez. Nestor was born in Guatemala and came to Chicago undocumented in the mid-'80s. He told his first story at a moth slam to get over the stuttering that plagued his childhood, and since then, he's won more than 50 moth story slams. Nestor hosts his own storytelling podcast called 80 Minutes Around the World, featuring the stories and voices of immigrants and refugees. And he also shares his adventures of driving for a rideshare company in his own book, Your Driver Has Arrived. I think all of these contacts are going into the chat box. So I spent the last 4 months building this show, and I was still looking for just the right story to make it a wrap all the way until last week when I found Nestor's story. And I knew Nestor Gomez was the one to bring us over the finish line. Your time, Nestor.
Thank you. Ouch, 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 came the scream as soon as the doctor got the needle close to my 1-year-old son. He had already suffered several near fatal asthma attacks. I was holding him as the doctors were testing him with different substances to see what triggered his asthma. The doctor paused. Let's try this again. No, 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 no! Another scream as the doctor tried injecting my son. The doctor glared at me. Why are you screaming? He asked me. Sorry, I say. I am afraid of needles. Just thinking about needles made me close my eyes in fear. I knew the fear. When I was a kid living in Guatemala, my family was extremely poor. But my mother made sure that my siblings and I had all our vaccinations up to date. But since we didn't have insurance, my mother had to rely on a lady from the neighborhood who came to our house to give us the vaccinations. This was a lady with minimum medical training. The vaccinations were painful. Whenever I saw the lady coming to the house, I would take off running, and my mother had to run and catch me. Then he would have to drag me to her bedroom, put me down in the bed, and sometimes even sit on top of me. One day, I heard my mother saying that the lady was coming to the house in a few minutes. So I decided that instead of running, I was going to hide in the one place where they would not look for me, underneath my mother's bed. I hid so well that for a long time my mother couldn't find me. I'm sorry, the lady was telling my mom. It's getting late. I have to go. My mother started crying. I am so afraid that my son is going to get sick. All kids get sick, the lady responded. But I already lost 2 kids, my mother said, crying. My daughter got sick in the middle of the night and died next to me in bed. And then my son died in my arms while I carried him back from the hospital. I kept thinking that if they could be alive, if I had been able to pay for the vaccinations. That's what my mother explained to the lady. Now, I knew that my siblings had died when I was young, but I had never imagined that my mom had suffered so much and that she blamed herself for it. Don't cry, Mom, I told my mom as I came out of my hiding spot. I tried to dry the tears from her eyes. It's okay to be afraid, my mother said. I'm afraid too. Just close your eyes. Don't look at the needle. Hey, the doctor was yelling at me, bringing me back to the present. Are you going to faint? He asked. No, I got this, I responded. I went into the room and I held my son while the doctors got another needle ready. It's okay to be afraid, I told my son. Just close your eyes. Don't look at the needle. But I wasn't really talking to my son. He was 1 year old. He couldn't understand me. I was really talking to myself. Because even 2 weeks ago, as I was getting my COVID vaccine, I had still had to look away because I'm still afraid of needles. Thank you.
I feel you, Nestor. I too am afraid of needles, and I'm getting my second vaccination on Monday. Thank you for your story.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you all storytellers for helping me birth this baby and deliver it to you. Thank you, audience, for coming. I do want to thank Scott Frost, who has guided us through this live show in such a beautiful, calm manner. If you ever need a online producer for any show or podcast, check out Scott Frost. And Cotter, you have any last thoughts you want to share?
Oh my gosh, where do I start? Well, we had an emotional roller coaster. We laughed, we cried, and we shared important stories. Thank you, Rocky, for putting all of this together. I want to ask you, how do you feel now we are at the finish line?
I'm very happy. I'm super red in the face here, but I just want to say one thing I feel, this pandemic has really upended our lives, all of us, and none of us are the same. The before times were gone. They're gone. And when we come out into this new world and expand our social circles, I think that we have to give ourselves and everyone a break and just be kind and have patience and create a better new normal.
That is very true. And I cannot stress it enough. And storytelling and art is one way to deal and make memorable moment. This moment right here, we shared it together. The storytellers, the host, the co-host, and the audience, the people that are watching on YouTube from home. We share this moment together, and it will be here 2021. 10 years from now, we will remember this moment, and this will be on YouTube, so you can rewatch it again. You can share it with your friends. with your coworker. Tell people about this, 1.5 hour full of beautiful, beautiful stories.
Yeah. Well, I say that's our show.
Stay strong.
Story on.